tonight we are here to experience the consciousness expanding wisdom of Juliana McCarthy, who has been a conduit of wisdom for me in my life for years and years, and so it's a real pleasure for you to be here tonight. We were just talking about it, tonight's a real full circle moment for us. Years ago we were having coffee in Boulder. I think the day that she had been approached to write the book. And so during coffee we were discussing that, and we were also talking about this project that was under development at the time. So it's pretty surreal that we're now sitting here and the book is out and totally thriving and flourishing, and we're here in this space. And so it's a really fun way to kick off this kind of series that we're wanting to have here at Vibrant, where we have brilliant thinkers and philosophers who are here to kind of disseminate wisdom, and kind of topical for tonight is kind of help usher in the paradigm shift of kind of elevated well-being for mankind. So with that, here's Juliana. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I should hold it. Can you hear me when I do this? Or is it better like this? Better. Okay. I'll hold it like I'm in the microphone. Thank you so much, Kelly. I'm so happy to be here. And it's wild, we just put that together, that the day we met in person for the first time was the day I had just met with the publisher for the first time after they approached me to write this book. And now, the book is out, and you're talking to me about building this space, and we're in this space, and the book is out, and it's all happening. So as she was saying, I'm an astrologer. I write astrology articles every month, which there are actually astrology cards here if you don't know about them, and those are my monthly astrology articles. And I also write about the new and full moon every month on my website, etherealculture.com, and I have an Instagram, Ethereal Culture, and I wrote a book, which is an introduction to astrology called The Stars Within You, A Modern Guide to Astrology, and I have a few for sale if anyone's interested in one later. And I give talks regularly at various places. I give talks every other month in New York at the Alchemist Kitchen, and I give talks at music festivals sometimes. I just talked at Foreign Festival. I gave 3 talks in Arcosanti, Arizona. And it's so fun that so many people are now interested in astrology. I think most millennials now are into astrology. You can walk into a room and ask anyone their moon sign and they know if they're, of that generation. And it means I get to do this for a living, which feels miraculous. And tonight we're going to be talking about the paradigm shift of 2020. And 2020, for those of you who don't know, is a huge year astrologically. It's a year where we're actually beginning a whole new age in humanity, which means we're also ending an age in humanity. And by age, I mean 1,000-year age. And actually, multiple ages are ending right now. We have the patriarchal age ending right now, and next year we're beginning a matriarchal age. So that means 6,500 years of patriarchy are now ending. And we're strong enough souls, I'm not with you. But it means we're strong enough souls to now kind of let the karma of 6,500 years of patriarchy move through us so we can transmute it and so we can create a kinder world. And at the same time, we're ending the Piscean age, which is a 2,000+ year age, which began around the time of the birth of Christ. And the Piscean age is symbolized by the fish, just like Christianity. And that is the age of waiting for a savior. So we're ending the age of waiting for a savior and beginning the age of individual liberation, or the Aquarian age. And that has to do with the vernal equinox and where it's pointing. So there's subtle shifts in terms of the Earth's axis and where it's pointing and where the vernal equinox then points. And it has been pointing to Pisces, as I said, for the last 2,000+ years, and now it's moving into Aquarius, or it has moved into Aquarius. The exact location is debatable. But that is the infamous Aquarian age that we've been singing about for a long time. So we are beginning the Aquarian age, moving out of the Piscean age. And then next year, starting January 2020, we have 3 outer planets beginning to form exact conjunctions, which means they're within 10 degrees of each other. And the exact conjunction is 0 degrees. They're at the exact same degree from the perspective of Earth. In Capricorn, so it's Pluto, which moves in 248-year cycles around the sun, and then Saturn, which moves in 29.5-year cycles, and Jupiter, which moves in 12-year cycles. All 3 of these planets are lining up in exact conjunctions next year in Capricorn for the first time in thousands of years. So that means Capricorn is systems, structures, governments, heads of government, big business, the status quo, traditions. Pluto is death and rebirth. Saturn is karma, lord of karma, also represents systems and structures. And Jupiter is the great benefic. It expands everything it touches and brings full light energy and exaggeration to all that it touches. And it's also philosophy and belief systems. Is this working? Okay. Philosophy and belief systems are the ruler of Sagittarius. So the fact that all 3 of these planets are coming together in Capricorn means that we're literally rebirthing society. We're rebirthing government. We're rebirthing pretty much everything we know to be reality and culture and society. And Capricorn is patriarchy. So 6,500 years ago, when these 3 planets formed a conjunction in Capricorn, it happens every 2,200 years or so. The North Node was in Capricorn, and the North Node points our way forward. The lunar nodes are those points on either side of Earth where the lunar path and the solar path meet. And when there's a new moon or a full moon at one of those points, that's when we have an eclipse. So the North Node points our way forward. It says this is where we're going. This is the direction we're taking. So when those 3 planets formed their conjunction and the North Node was in Capricorn, patriarchy, the father, that was the beginning of patriarchy. And if you look historically, that's actually the moment when the Macedonian god, lightning god worshipping culture took over as the prevalent belief system from the fertility goddess worshipping culture that had been prevalent up until then. So now next year, the North Node, as we form these conjunctions, is in Cancer, the Great Mother, matriarchy. So now we're ending 6,500 years of patriarchy and beginning a matriarchal age. And astrologers have been predicting this for a very long time. And if you didn't know that, I think you can tell that what's happening right now is like totally lining up with what we've been predicting or what the planets have been indicating is coming. I don't know. I mean, it might be hard to feel because before revolution, there's always this kind of contraction. It's like the tension of pulling the arrow back before it flings forward. The fascism that precedes revolution. So in a way, there's been a backlash. But to me, it feels like the last gasp of patriarchy, or the last gasp of ego, before it kind of unravels and we begin something new. So even though there are people who are resisting this change, it's not going to work out for them. Trust me. So even next year, it's like when we have Pluto, the planet of death, rebirth, and transmutation, forming a conjunction with Saturn, the lord of karma. I mean, that combination is karmic explosions. So if we're doing things that are neurotic Capricorn, because every sign has neurotic and enlightened qualities. But when we're doing work on a sign, as we are with Capricorn, and we have been for a while, then we're purifying neurotic Capricorn. And neurotic Capricorn can be authoritative, controlling, or oppressive of emotions. It can be empty achievement, right? So I must achieve at the expense of my well-being, or the expense of the earth, or the expense of other people, right? So that's what we're purifying now. We're not in that kind of paradigm any longer. And if we continue to pursue things like empty achievement at the expense of other people's well-being, at the expense of the earth's well-being, it's not going to go well for us, starting next year. And we're already seeing things happen, like London, I think in London, the London Stock Exchange announced that they're going to remove companies that aren't in compliance with environmental regulations. And things like that are going to continue to happen, so that actually the people who are successful are the people who care. The people who are financially rewarded are the people who are actually caring for one another and empowering people who haven't been previously empowered. So that's part of the shift that's going on in Aquarius, is the future. Aquarius is technology, egalitarian, and the pinnacle of human potential. And so as we move into this Aquarian age, we have 2,000 plus years to create enlightened society, basically. We have 2,000 plus years to kind of come back from spiritual bypassing and say, you know what? We can't actually open our hearts and be love and oneness unless we have our basic needs met. And because we are one, because oneness is the pinnacle, that's transcendence. When we reach oneness, or we attain oneness, or we realize our interconnection, it's like, well, that means that if you're suffering, I'm suffering. That means if I have power, I share power. If I have wealth, I share wealth. And that is the definition of the matriarchal age. We're not replicating patriarchy with woman on top. That's, if you think about it symbolically, that's like the phallus, right? The steep patriarchal hierarchy. The feminine model is about lateral circles, radiating outward, everyone working together, and this quality of sharing power, sharing wealth, and making sure that everyone has their basic needs met. So if you think about enlightened Cancer, the sign, the Great Mother, it's how can I orient to all beings as if they're my own mother or child. That includes ants, that includes plants, that includes people, all people, so that's the aspiration, and that's what we're beginning to sort of make room for. So it's this simultaneous collapse of the old paradigm as we begin to rebuild the new paradigm. And that means it's happening inside of us too. There's no difference between what's happening inside of us and what's happening outside of us. So I don't know if y'all have been feeling this, but it's been intense over here. Like a lot of things have been coming up for me and for all the people around me, and it's just getting loud. That quality of like karmic explosions is getting really loud within me even, and of the people around me, where it's like, yeah, I can't get away with that anymore, And I have to actually face myself, and I actually have to face this pattern that I've been undergoing that's harmful to myself and harmful to other people. And enlightened Cancer begins with self-care, so we have to be the mother to our own selves. We have to nurture our own inner child. And as we dismantle patriarchy, which is not a man-woman thing, by the way, we all have internalized patriarchy, every single one of us, and we all have inner feminine, and we all have inner masculine. So this is not a man-woman thing at all, we're all affected. But it's also, dismantling the belief system that emotions are to be either feared or something to be ashamed of. And something I've been noticing with this sort of gender binary, is like, there's so much masculine fear of emotion that's been conditioned in us, and then feminine shame, you know? So the feminine wave of emotion is expressed, and it's like the masculine wants to shut it down or push it away or call it crazy, you know, and the masculine in each of us, not man, woman again. And then the woman or the feminine inside of us that has just expressed the emotion goes into shameful vulnerability. You know, like, oh God, I'm crazy. What did I do? I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving of love. And so that's part of this psychological, emotional paradigm that we're sort of transmuting right now as well, you know, on a very deeply personal level. And I love Brené Brown in terms of this paradigm shift and her redefinition of strength as vulnerability. And that is a very new paradigm. That is very Cancerian matriarchal age, you know. Actually, feeling our feelings is strength, you know, and feeling our feelings without shame is like super strength, you know. And I mean, that's what I've been feeling so deeply is like, whoa, I mean, what do I need to do to get there, you know? And it's happening for me rapidly, like the universe is getting super loud, you know, like, oh, here's your pattern on steroids in your face. Oh, we're back. And I don't know, if you guys know, we've been in Mercury retrograde in Scorpio for the past few weeks since Thanksgiving. Not Thanksgiving, Halloween, the last holiday. And it ended on Thursday, I believe. Anyone know about that or aware of that? Yeah, okay. Scorpio, man. So a retrograde, for those of you who don't know, is when a planet's orbit is going slower than the Earth's rotation. So it appears, or the Earth's rotation. So or the Earth's orbit. Sorry, I'm getting this confused. So when they're going alongside of each other, it appears like the planet's going backwards because we're moving faster than they are, and they're close enough to us. So it's not how the planets are relating to the sun that affect us. It's where they are in relation to Earth. And so before we knew that we were heliocentric, or that all of the planets were moving around the sun, we would observe these planets beginning to move backwards, and it'd be like, what is going on? You know, and so that's the retrograde, when it appears as if the planet's moving backwards, but it's not. But that effect on us is profound, and it means that planet's energy starts getting really powerful and more internal, and it slows down. And it's time for introspection, review, and reflection, you know, versus bolting ahead and communicating and getting it all messed up, which is the reputation of Mercury retrograde, with things going awry. So we've been in this like deeply reflective period in Scorpio, which is the underworld, which is our deep psychological shadow work, and that looking at the places that scare us and feeling the places that scare us. So I don't know what you guys have been experiencing, but I talk to people every day, and it's been like, oh God, what is going on? You know, like these things are erupting, and I'm feeling these intense feelings, and why is this returning? But that's part of this process. I mean, we are getting so close to Saturn conjunct Pluto exact. The first exact conjunction is January 12th. So and then we have an eclipse on Christmas Day before that, along the Capricorn Cancer axis. So things are really ramping up now. We are really getting down to business. And from March till September of this year, we had Saturn, Pluto, and the South Node all circling around each other. You know, Saturn and Pluto didn't make an exact conjunction, but they were really close and near the South Node. And so the South Node is our past life karma, ancestral karma, family karma, the karma that we're here in this lifetime to resolve. Pluto, death and rebirth, transformation, Saturn, karma. So this deep karmic transmutation of our oldest patterns within ourselves, our families, you know, the topics of white supremacy and misogyny and, the collective underbelly got really loud during that 6-month period, and it felt like, they were in retrograde. What are we going to do? We see it, but what are we going to do about it? And then as soon as those planets stationed direct, within a few days, it was Greta Thunberg created, the worldwide march against global warming and for the environment. And at the same time, the impeachment inquiry was announced, right, when Saturn stationed direct. So we're feeling karma ripening. And I know not necessarily we're all on the same page politically. I don't know. I know I'm in Texas, so I don't know how much I can say, but I think we can agree on the fact that there has been mistreatment of the earth and a lack of care for all groups of people, for everybody who's been oppressed. And there's been a resurgence in a really loud, disturbing way in retaliation, to the changes that have started to occur. But as we were saying, it's like the karma is ripening, and the people who haven't been kind of aligned with open-hearted oneness, and the people who haven't cared about the collective as much as their own personal gain or pocketbook, or people who wanted to have external blame for their suffering, which isn't actually doing the internal work. That's where the karmic eruptions are starting to take place. It's like, well, you're not going to get away with that anymore. And in a way, we had to see it really loudly to snap out of our complacency, both personally and in the collective. It's like, okay, the patterns are obvious, the patterns are loud, the patterns have been extracted from the underworld to the surface, for all of us to sort of see and observe and decide what are we going to do from here. And we're not waiting for the savior anymore, it's not like, I think a lot of people saw Obama as a savior. It's like, oh, you're here to save us, you're saving us, save us, and then everyone went to sleep in complacency. It's like, okay, we're moving toward egalitarianism. I can rest easy and not do anything. But this paradigm shift, or that's starting to happen, it's like, okay, well, what can the universe do to wake us all up out of our complacency? And it's like, well, here comes Trump. And his chart's very interesting. He was born within a few hours of the lunar eclipse. And his north node, which is his true light path, is conjunct his sun and Uranus. So to be the great awakener, to bring chaos to the world, to wake people up, and he's doing it. Whatever we believe, he's definitely shaken things up, and he is, in a way, paving the path to revolution by extracting the underbelly of society and showing us all the places where we are still divisive, or where we are still hateful, or we aren't caring for one another, and where we're capable of closing our hearts to one another and being at war with each other. So in that sense, he was sort of the perfect precursor to matriarchy. So I've looked at the charts of the candidates, and I do have some ideas about what's going to happen. But we'll see. But I will say about Trump's chart, the Pluto-Saturn conjunctions are really pummeling him all next year. Pummeling. So karmic explosions galore for Trump next year. Whatever that ends up meaning, we'll see. But for the feminists among us, it's hopeful. And for the egalitarians among us, it's hopeful, I'll say. So that's coming up in all the ways. And it's fascinating to study the Pluto-Saturn synod. It's SYNOD is the word. And that's the pattern that formed forms when they form the conjunction, and then Saturn moves faster than Pluto. So then Saturn moves around in a circle and forms a 90-degree angle with Pluto, which is called a square, a waxing square. And then it moves to the opposition, and then the waning square, and then the conjunction again. The most significant moments in human history happen at one of those freaking angles. Okay, so World War I, Saturn-Pluto conjunction. World War II, Saturn-Pluto square. The 60s Cultural Revolution, the opposition, etc. The last synod cycle, and I don't have my notes, but it was like, Reaganomics was established during the last conjunction, and then the square was the first World Trade Center attack, and the opposition was 9/11, and then the waning square was the economic crisis of 2008. And so we're actually also going to see with this last synod closing, is, that was in Libra. So if we're thinking about the Capricorn conjunction, that hasn't happened for, 2,200 years with Jupiter involved. But if we're just thinking of Saturn and Pluto forming conjunctions, the last one was 1982. So we're actually also ending Reaganomics, according to astrology. And with Uranus in Taurus for 7 years, which just happened, Uranus moves in 7-year cycles, and Uranus is revolution and abrupt, shocking change. And Uranus we think about the 7-year itch, right? So 7-year cycles, and then it's time for change. It just changed signs. And Taurus is money, food and farming, agriculture, and the feminine. And so now we're seeing a lot of this starting to revolutionize. The changes happening with the climate and the natural disasters are kind of calling us to get more serious about environmentalism. And the economy is likely to have a huge hit, however that ends up looking. During this cycle, most people are predicting either later in 2020 or 2021. But it's a reallocation of resources that's being called for. So actually things like universal income make a lot of sense for Uranus and Taurus. And a revolutionizing power relating to money is likely to happen. It seems inevitable at this point because it's not sustainable as it is. And instead of this being a model where we're giving the money to the big businesses and the 1% hold everything, and there's no middle class, and there's a homeless epidemic, where it's like bringing the economy to a more egalitarian model where we do have our basic needs met. And in fact, as technology starts to rapidly expand, which we'll talk about, that's on the horizon too, more and more jobs are going to be replaced by technology, basically. And so it's going to be increasingly important that everyone has their basic needs met no matter what. So something like universal income would actually make a whole lot of sense. But can you imagine living in a world where the message is just because you breathe, you deserve to have your basic needs met? How matriarchal is that? You're worthy of unconditional love. You're worthy of being cared for and taken care of just because you breathe, which is the opposite of patriarchy, which is like, work hard. You don't deserve my love unless you earn it. You have to basically, stab people in the back and sacrifice your own well-being to be successful. That's the opposite model that we're moving into. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're now, the earth is rumbling, and that's where we're moving toward. For better or for worse, not everyone's going to think that's the way, but that's what the stars are pointing to. So, there's so much more to say. I'll pause for a minute and just see if anyone has questions so far before I keep filling your minds with information. Does anyone have a question so far? Yeah.
I guess just my general question was, were you always into astrology? Like, were you in astrology through your education? Or how did you start learning about this, and what drove your passion towards this direction?
Oh yeah, so yeah, I should have started from the beginning, but I just dove right into the deep end. Yeah, astrology is amazing. Astrology, most people think of astrology as like reading your horoscope in the back of a magazine, although that's been changing really quickly. Most people understand now it's so much more than that. And you don't just have a sun sign. You have a moon sign and a Venus and a Mars and a Pluto, and wherever the planets were at the moment of your first breath reveals another layer of your psyche and who you are. And you can look at it either in that personal way of who am I, what are my potentials, what is my life path, and where am I going, like what phase am I in? Or you can look at what we've been talking about, which is mundane astrology, which is looking at where the planets are for the collective and what phase we're in as a collective and where we're going as a collective. And so the question was, how did I get into this? And I've been into this for over 20 years now, and it started because I was so confused about being a human, and I didn't understand myself or anyone around me. I was like perplexed and felt like an alien, and then I found this system that so beautifully, logically explains human complexity, both within myself and the people around me, and then I just got obsessed with it. I was 18, and that happened, and started reading everyone's charts around me. In college, there were lines out the door for people to have their charts read. And I quickly realized, it was like, people really like it when you read their charts. It's like, I went from being awkward to like having a lot of friends, and friends were calling me pretty much every day to get astrological advice. And I was like, I would love more than anything to just do this for a living and not go to an office every day. And finally, I moved to Boulder. I moved to a Buddhist retreat center, was studying Buddhism, and then was doing everyone's charts there. And then moved to Boulder and met this amazing teacher, and he kind of filled in all the gaps for me, because astrology is really complex and there's so many different facets to it. But things like solar return charts and regressions and the outer planets, he sort of filled in the gaps. And then he got brain cancer and died really quickly. He was only in his 40s, and we were really close during that time, and I would even go and visit him in the hospital, and I wouldn't be allowed, but he would convince the nurses that I was an elf so I could be in the room. He said, she's not a human, she's an elf, she can be here. So I was very present with him as an elf, and he empowered me to be a professional astrologer at that moment in time, and his vision was to write an astrology book that would go into the mainstream and bring this ancient art and this ancient language back into mainstream culture, because it was actually shamed, through the Spanish Inquisition and the propaganda of the Catholic Church, which was shaming things like sexuality and astrology and healing arts and paganism and anything that basically connected us directly to the divine without the intervention of steep patriarchal hierarchy. And so there was that, and so astrology was demonized at that point. And then the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment, when we figured out we were heliocentric and not geocentric, a lot of our belief systems were really questioned. And science became the fashion, and then it was like, well, unless we can prove something through the scientific method, we're not going to believe it. And so a lot of the feminine wisdom arts were lost at that point, but not lost completely, because somehow astrology has really survived, throughout thousands of years. It predates Christianity. And the ancient Egyptians and the Babylonians were practicing it. And that's the origin of astrology. But now he had this vision that with this new paradigm that's coming next year, he would write a book that would help bring astrology back into the new age. And he died before he ever did that. And then as soon as I became professional and was writing articles, the book publisher contacted me, and asked me to author this book. And it very much felt like my teacher's vision channeling through me. And now it's in Urban Outfitters, and it's been translated into 4 languages, and it's like totally around the world now. So it feels like a fulfillment of his vision, and somehow that was my role, my unexpected. Anyway, that was a long answer. Cool. Any other questions before we keep going? Okay. So, and anyone here a Capricorn? Okay, sorry guys, I didn't mean to only talk about your negative qualities. Capricorn has a lot of integrity and really good at delegating. And we're not just abandoning Capricorn, we're transmuting Capricorn. And if you think about the symbol for Capricorn, did anyone know that it's actually it's a mountain goat with a mermaid's tail? How many people knew that? 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. So it's not just the goat climbing the mountain 1 foot in front of the other, which is certainly an aspect of Capricorn. The new Capricorn is like, let's dive into the ocean of oneness, into the ocean of feeling our feelings, into the ocean of caring for each other, and then build from there. Then apply our integrity and our skills around delegation and our abilities to build. Let's build it from that place, that oceanic wisdom. And so I just wanted to say that, so you don't have to feel bad for being a Capricorn. It's also, and of course the father is a beautiful archetype. It's just that we're rooting out the neurosis of that archetype that's become sort of rampant in the fabric of our society. And is anyone here a Cancer? Yay, a couple of people. So, Cancers get a bad rap, sort of, because it's like very emotional, very sensitive sign. But we're also like learning about the enlightened qualities of Cancer too at the same time. It's like, how do we feel our feelings in a way where we're not just getting stuck there, but we're also kind of looking to the horizon and thinking, what can I do with this tender heart? How can I work with people to implement this kind world that I imagine? So both of those signs are really transforming, and Cancer's really finding her power right now. Any Aquarius? Yay. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I met you earlier. You're very Aquarian. I'm Aquarius moon. Yeah, so Aquarians are also finding their thrones in this new paradigm where we've been the weirdos and the rebels and the eccentrics. And you never minded, yeah. Spoken like a true Aquarius. Aquarians are the rebels, and we're like actually thrive on being unpopular. So we're gonna have to learn how to be popular now. Never, yeah. So yeah, that's great. So now we have a 3D example of Aquarian energy in the middle of the room. And the last thing I'll say that's so important is how many people know about the goddesses in astrology? Not like one person. So the goddesses are fascinating, and they're mostly in the asteroid belt that are between Mars and Jupiter, the goddess asteroids. And it's interesting to think about that placement because Mars is the last personal planet, and Jupiter is the first social planet, the first collective planet. So the goddesses are leading us from the me plan to thinking about the collective whole. And they have gotten so loud over the last couple of years. Like astrologers barely understood them until recently because they've been so quiet. And now it's undeniable who they are and what their roles are. And actually, I want to write my next book about them. But it started for me, like I started really observing them during the Great American Eclipse, which was August of 2017, if you guys remember that. And Pluto had just been demoted from a planet to a dwarf planet And Ceres had just been promoted from an asteroid to a dwarf planet. So suddenly they were on the same playing field. And Pluto is, of course, the lord of the underworld, the rapist and abductor of Persephone. And Ceres, Ceres, is the mother of Persephone, who never gave up on her. And when she went to the underworld every year, Ceres would mourn and it would become winter. So that's the myth that explains winter. And then when Persephone would emerge from the underworld in the spring, she would set the flowers in bloom with Taurus. The Ceres, the bull, is Taurus. And so actually, if you're a Taurus, the symbol isn't just the bull, it's Persephone riding the bull, setting the flowers in bloom. So suddenly, during the Great American Eclipse, which was this real trigger point for bringing in the Aquarian Age, along the Leo-Aquarius axis, Ceres and Pluto were exactly opposite each other. And Ceres was like, I'm taking you down now, Pluto. You're not going to get away with this anymore. Okay, so that was like this powerful moment. And Ceres is considered the goddess of female rights, the protector of the earth and the protector of the feminine. 5 weeks later, Jupiter, the great expander, moved into Scorpio, Pluto's domain, the underworld. Power, abuse of power, sexuality. 5 days later, the Me Too movement began. Jupiter was there for a whole year, and that was the year when shit hit the fan. That was the year when all the skeletons started coming out of the closet, and it's like, no, actually, Pluto, you can't get away with that anymore. And then Ceres started circling the North Node, our true path forward, for 9 months, saying, this is where we're heading now, guys. And meanwhile, Jupiter hit Vesta, sacred sexuality, the Vestal virgins who were enslaved by the Catholic Church, whose role it was to help people heal through sexuality. And that was the unshackling of the Vestal virgins, so reclaiming of female sexuality for sacred purposes also occurred. That's when Stormy Daniels hit the scene, the sacred whore. So then, that's my interpretation. So then, it's just a little bit of a stretch, but good timing. Then the most important moment that I'm trying to get to is that January 12th, 2020, when Saturn and Pluto form their first exact conjunction, bringing in the new freaking paradigm in top-line patriarchy, at 22 degrees Capricorn. 22, the master number, 2020 for numerologists out there. 22 degrees Capricorn, the year 2020. 22, the master teacher number. So at that moment, guess who's exactly conjunct at 22 degrees Capricorn? Ceres. The goddess of female rights, the protector of the earth, the protector of the feminine. The mother who never gives up on her daughter and protects her, helping to bring in the Cancerian matriarchal age. So we're reclaiming the power of Pluto to protect the earth and to protect the feminine. As we topple this old paradigm whose karmic reckoning is now arrived. So I like to tell young people this because they're like, the world is ending. We're hopeless, and that there's actually a lot of despair going around with young people just feeling like, what's the point? The world is ending and it's so messed up, and Trump is president and nobody cares about each other. And it's important, I think, this actually demonstrates why myth and astrology is so helpful and so beautiful, because we can take a step back and see the greater arc of meaning and see the trajectory of where we're going and why. And maybe it's painful now, but that pain is part of our purification. And maybe we're feeling pain now in our personal lives or being confronted with, our own shadows, our own painful patterns, grief, whatever it is, heartbreak, mental disturbance of all kinds, but that if we can be still and allow for those feelings to arise and dismantle the fear and dismantle the shame and keep our hearts open no matter what, and then help others do the same. That's all we're here to do. And that's what the stars are saying that we are doing. That's all part of our purification process. You know, the white supremacy and all these things that have gotten loud that make us feel so hopeless about the world. You know, they're actually part of this great purification that's happening. And we're thinking about thousands of year cycles. So we can't just think about, you know, the pain that we're stuck in at this moment. You know, it will lead to our liberation if we can be fearless or move through our fear, and we can move through our shame and transmute it, harness that power of Pluto to transmute it and transform it and come into our true strength and power and then share it with others. So anyway, that's what's happening. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say. So if we have more questions now, this is a good time to ask them.
You briefly mentioned technology.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I wanted to talk about that. Okay, so by December 2020, the last Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that's happening in the year, it's happening at 0 degrees Aquarius. So after all this work of transmuting Capricorn, we're then moving into the Aquarian age completely at that point. We're moving into the future and we're moving into revolution. We'll see what that ends up meaning. You know, it's the month after the election, and suddenly we're in revolution. So we're not. It's not just next year and we're done. Okay, so it's still going on, and America's going to have its first Pluto return in 2022, 2023. So the death and rebirth of the United States is on the horizon. You know, we could really be rethinking our Constitution and the way government is structured and all of that. That's on the horizon. And then by 2025, all these Earth planets, like Pluto and Capricorn and Uranus and Taurus, like all the outer planets are in Earth signs. They're all going to be in air signs. And that's when we're going to be rapidly moving into this like exponential era of technology growing and finding new innovative solutions for things, like really merging with technology in various ways. So that starts December 2020, but will continue, you know, for 10 years. So yeah, keep your mind on that December 2020 date, because if things get messy or difficult or challenging over the next year, things will really start to change quickly and shift just so quickly in ways we will not be able to predict or expect as soon as that conjunction occurs. So I'm speaking like you all believe that this is real, but some of you may not, but trust me, it's real. You'll see. Any other questions?
If we have a sign you didn't mention, should we bring it up?
Yeah,
For any
what sign?
advice? I'm an Aries.
Aries. Oh, okay, so Chiron is in Aries. And Chiron just moved into Aries for the first time in 51 years. So Aries is leadership in the masculine. And that's actually this whole Brene Brown movement, the vulnerability is strength, is very much Chiron and Aries. And so for anyone who's in Aries, this is a time to feel your vulnerability and to lead, not from just straight impulsivity or straight like the confidence in just like, I don't know defeat, so I'm just gonna leap, you know. This is what I want, going after it. It's like there's something deepening for Aries right now, where it's like, okay, I am feeling vulnerable, and I'm gonna lead from this place, and my true strength is actually linked to feeling my feelings and feeling that softening and that deepening into not self-doubt, but definitely that quality of tender-heartedness. And I think of Aries as the spiritual warrior, but really the tender warrior. So that tender warriorship archetype is becoming more pronounced for Aries, if that makes sense. And it's interesting because Chiron is the wounded healer, and Aries is the masculine, and it also can be accidents and things like that. And when Chiron moved into Aries the last time, within 3 days Martin Luther King was killed, and he became this great martyr for the civil rights movement, being sparked and actually implementing. And then RFK was killed soon after that. And this time around, the Parkland kids, that happened right before Chiron moved into Aries, and the kids have been the real martyrs, because Aries also rules children. It's the baby of the zodiac, and it can be innocence, and playfulness. And so that's been an interesting correlation with that shift. And that's happening for 7 years, so it's a long transit. And it also began, as we said, the civil rights movement, the hippie movement, these movements around organics and things like that, and that's coming back. How can we heal through our food, through the earth? How can we relate to food differently and more mindfully? Which vibrance a great example of. Yeah.
Could you speak about Virgo?
Virgo. Oh yeah, I'm a Virgo. Yeah. I'm biased. Whenever I talk about Virgo, I get shit for being biased toward Virgo, so that's my disclaimer. But Virgo is actually the only goddess of the zodiac, right? If you think about all the signs, she's the only female. But I think Taurus is also Persephone, the goddess. So, but really only Virgo in traditional astrology. And Virgo correlates with the goddess Astraea. And Astraea was the last god or goddess to give up on Earth at the beginning of the Bronze Age, when humans became really depraved, according to Greek myth. And Astraea, just like Virgo, was like, I won't give up. We can fix this. And finally she gave up, but vowed to return to bring in the new golden age, which is beginning next year. And so that goddess energy of Astraea and Virgo, or the humble servant, is what's leading the way forward. And the boomer generation is actually the Pluto and Leo generation. And as much as there are amazing boomers like Bernie and, I just got political, sorry. I like Bernie, sorry. So there are amazing boomers, of course, but there is also the underbelly of that generation was abuse of power, which is very Pluto and Leo. And actually, right when Pluto moved into Leo, that's when McCarthyism happened. And the last time Pluto moved into Leo, that was the Salem witch trials. So there's a strong correlation there. And Leo is the sign right before Virgo. Leo also has good qualities, very good qualities. But the neurotic Leo can be the sort of king gone awry, or the narcissism. And so we're moving out of the narcissistic age and into this age that is more led by the humble servant, or how can I serve, how can I be a benefit, which is Virgo. So that's Virgo's role. Yeah. And Leo is also like creative and joyful and generous and wonderful. So sorry for talking shit about Leo. Any other questions? Yeah.
So Scorpio asks, what will we learn in the realm of Eros over this year? What will it teach us?
Eros?
Eros.
Oh, Eros. Like E-R-O-S? Oh, I haven't been paying attention to it. Do you want to share something?
No.
Okay. Because I didn't think about Eris, E-R-I-S. Eris will be forming a square to Pluto and Saturn during the first conjunction. And Eris is the goddess of discord and strife. And so I think she threw something into a party and everyone freaked out. Like everyone was jealous and she threw something in and then created this whole kerfuffle. So it might be a kerfuffle as we bring in the new paradigm, like a big scale kerfuffle. But yeah, if you know something about Eros. Okay. Eros is a very romantic asteroid. Yeah. I look at that when I'm looking at compatibility between two people, but I haven't been looking at it in the collective. Any other questions?
As far as the the square goes, there was a lot. So I might not be referring to it properly, but then we talked about the different events that happened, like the wax community and the 2008 financial crisis and everything.
Yeah.
Is there a general time period in between them when people can expect something big to happen next? Or
Oh, in between those big
Yeah.
conjunctions? Yeah, I mean, there are other things that are happening too. Like we just had a Pluto-Uranus square that started in 2012. So that's not the only major thing happening. But if you want to look at patterns in history and this sort of big moments of societal shifts, then Pluto-Saturn. But Pluto and Uranus is also pretty freaking major. So yeah, I mean, those are just these really these key moments of change, the Saturn-Pluto. But that doesn't mean life stands still in between those moments. Yeah.
I have a question just as related to the sign Sagittarius, because that's my sun sign, but also there's a lot going on this day.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. This is a big day astrologically, and I've been feeling it so intensely. But there's good and bad, or there's good and challenging, I should say. But the good is that Venus and Jupiter are forming a conjunction today, which only happens once a year. And Venus is love, and Jupiter is the great expander, and good fortune, and openness, and perspective shifts. And so Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and Jupiter's been in Sagittarius for the past year. So this is like an extra big boost of starting to have a perspective shift and feel optimistic again, especially with regards to love. And we're really powerfully supported in healing through our connections to others right now. Today in particular, but this whole period of Mercury and Scorpio too. And on the same day, right now, pretty much, Mars is also opposing Uranus, which is also only a once a year transit, or once every 2.5 years or something like that. And so that's another big deal. And it's really liberating from all these places we've been kind of stuck in, these old patterns, this psychological turmoil, these ruts in our relationship patterns. And it's a kind of cathartic breakthrough that's not necessarily comfortable, but it's like, okay, break through this shit so you can expand your capacity for love, and we can heal with each other. And in a way, we're also turning on its side that notion that's sort of propagated by the New Agers, which is that we have to do this alone. Actually, we have to do this together. And it's okay to need each other, and it's okay to support each other, and it's okay to really see the mirrors of who we are reflected back by one another and do this healing together. So it's also the masculine feminine paradigm shifting and healing. And so that whole shame fear model starting to shift. So there's a lot of capacity over the next year too for healing between the masculine and the feminine, which is so needed. And I'm starting to notice that in general, the masculine is starting to have big awakenings. It started this summer where there's so many men coming to me now that never came to me before, and they're like, I'm reading this book about the goddesses. I'm like, what? That's amazing. I'm having these spiritual downloads, really. I'm starting to see things differently and feel things differently. And it's giving me hope, that we're all kind of going to come back together on the same page. And in a way, the feminine in us had to be awakened first, because that's what's leading the way. But this next year, starting today, really, there's a big shift occurring where we can start to work together again instead of it being so freaking divisive.
So this is probably astrology 101, but how does your moon sign and your sun sign work together?
Yeah, so your sun sign is your basic personality, your basic being, how you see yourself, how you interact with your friends, the people that know you on an everyday basis. And then the moon sign is our deeper emotional selves. It's who we are within our inner lives, how we are emotionally, how we are in interpersonal dynamics, how we are with our families and the people we live with. And so you have to feed your sun and your moon equally. I always say the planets are your children, and you can't starve any of your children. But in a way, the moon is the most important one to feed, because that's the source of our emotional contentment and our emotional fulfillment. So if you're like a Capricorn sun, but you have your moon in Pisces, then to feel joy and vitality and confidence, which is your sun, you probably need to work and have, some kind of bigger purpose. But to feel emotional contentment, you have to make sure that work isn't usurping your sensitivity, your imagination, your spiritual, potentials, and your ability to just be and to dream and to float in the bathtub or the ocean. That's how those kind of work together, if that makes sense. I give astrology readings if anyone wants to understand themselves better. You can go into who you are. Any other questions? I don't even know what time it is. Anything at all? Anything about love? That's why I'm an astrologer. Right? In love with everybody all the time. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Kelly, and everyone who's helped to make this possible. And come see me if you want after, and my book is for sale if you want to flip through it or buy a copy. And follow me on Instagram, Ethereal Culture. You can sign up for my newsletter, which are published here on those little cards you can take with you if you want to know about the astrology of the month. And as I said, I give readings. I'm pretty booked these days, but you can sneak in there or write me if I don't have anything available, and I'll sneak you in. Thank you so much.
That was awesome. You're really blowing my mind tonight.
I
what to expect.
I was like talking to you so much because you're really.
I know. This is really like exactly what I've been going through. Like the month, I was in love with the Leo. He broke my heart last month, and so I'm just like, there's so much more. But anyways, no, my friend.